بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. So inshallah, when we study the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prior to revelation, we'll see that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was protected and he was preserved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was kept away from the common illnesses of society, but he wasn't sheltered. He saw the illnesses of society. He engaged with the illnesses of society, but he himself did not engage with the illnesses themselves. He never lost his own moral compass. When everyone else in the world was getting intoxicated, he wasn't getting intoxicated. When people growing up his age were being lewd and inappropriate with the opposite gender, he remained his hayat, his modesty. He even also always dressed properly. While building the Kaaba, some of the uncles of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told him to lift up his garment or remove his upper garment to make it easier for him to carry some of the bricks. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected him from that. And he was also protected from the greatest illness, which is the illness of shirk, the illness of worshipping idols, which is the greatest calamity that can befall a human being, is to worship other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this tells us that our beloved Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was a thoughtful person even before Nabuwah. And it also tells us that good human beings, regardless of whether they follow a specific religion or not, will have a good moral compass. And being good to one's parents is a universal value. It's from good character. It's a sign of a good human being. So there's certain traits that people see universally as good human traits. And so as Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam grew into a man throughout his life, Allah protected him, preserved him. He was someone who was of the group of what the scholars called Ismatul Anbiya. And those who can't sin. The prophets are those who can't sin. And Allah prepared him from an early age to be a prophet. A strong man, a forbearing man, a patient man, someone who was truthful, who was trustworthy. He was never immoral. He was never argumentative in nature. He was never abusive to anyone in his life. So if you want to do great, you can change your life in any moment, but when it comes earlier, it is better. And we see that in the example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that from his nature, from his start, from his birth, he was the perfect creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as the moments of revelation came close, his righteousness, his piety began to intensify. And from the characteristics of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that are underappreciated, and one that we have to understand, is that he was something called an ummi, someone who did not have the skill of reading and writing. And at the time, there were not very many people who did. So tradition, knowledge was preserved through the oral tradition. Arabs, they perfected the art of memory. The Arabs of the time, by many other cultures in the world, they were considered to be savages. But in some aspects of their culture, they were respected. They were very enlightened linguistically. They were artistic. They were intellectually inclined in terms of poetry. And so they would memorize thousands and thousands of lines of poetry. But poetry, it has a stanza, it has a rhythm, it can flow, it helps with the memorization when that happens. So they preserved their memory in a lot of other ways, and they show their intellectual might and their strength in their memory where a 4-year-old child at the time would be able to tell you its entire family lineage 20 generations back. Not only would they be able to tell you their family lineage, but they would be able to tell you the lineage of their horse, because they were thoroughbreds, these horses that they had. So they would be able to tell you their lineage or full lineage, and then the horse's full lineage as well. Every lineage was memorized. There were a very amazing story where there was a group of junior companions. One of them was a companion, another was a tabi'i. And they came to Syria to meet a very old Wahshi ibn Harb, radiallahu anhu, a companion. Now, Wahshi, when he was in the battle, before he accepted Islam, he was actually the one who killed the uncle of the Prophet, Hamza. So the young tabi'i and one of the companions, they wanted to ask him about this incident. So they go to a town in Syria and they asked about Wahshi. And they said that Wahshi is in the shade of his palace. He sits at the wall and it's a short distance away from here. You can go see him. So they go to see Wahshi. And Ubaydullah, the companion, he was wearing a turban, so you couldn't see anything except his feet, his eyes and his feet. So his face was even covered as well. And so Ubaydullah, radiallahu anhu, he goes to Wahshi and says, "Do you know me?" And Wahshi looks at him and says, "I don't know your name, but I know that a long time ago, that when I was a slave to someone named Adi ibn al-Khiyar, he married a woman called Qitab, who was the daughter of Abu al-As. And she delivered a boy for him in Mecca. And I grabbed that little boy and I looked for a wet nurse for that child. And he had feet that resemble your feet today." The memory. An astonishing memory these people have, right? So an ummi does not mean someone who was ignorant, or unfortunately how people translate it as illiterate, because it implies some type of ignorance. But it was just a skill that many Arabs didn't have, and so they preserved their intellectual history and their intellectual knowledge through other means. It's a very beautiful story of Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, where he says that one day when he was young, he had a book or a bag filled with his notes from his teachers. And on his way home, some thieves came and they took his bag. And so Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, he started begging these thieves, "You have no idea what's in these bags." And they're saying, what's so special about it? He says, "All my knowledge, everything that I know is in this bag. Please don't take it away from me." And Imam Ghazali, the thieves say to Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, you know what they say? They say that if it's in this bag, what kind of knowledge is it? You have to write it down, what kind of knowledge is it? And they took the bag and left. Imam Ghazali, heartbroken, he says, "From that day, I realized that what they had just done to me taught me a lesson, that I was just going around parroting what my teachers were saying and just copying word for word. And I've never really truly thought for myself. I never really truly reflected, memorized, and preserved this knowledge for myself." And he says, "From that day forward, I promised that every letter that I would write down, I would also memorize in my head." SubhanAllah. And what's so beautiful, he says, those two thieves were the best teachers of my life. Those were the best teachers I could have ever had because of what it set forth. And then we became the great Imam al-Ghazali that we know today. But being an ummi, someone who didn't know how to read and write, was actually a blessing. There are many reasons, but two reasons I'll share. Is one, it cannot be claimed that Rasulullah read this stuff from somewhere else and wrote it down and then made the Quran himself. Could not be claimed. Because he couldn't have gotten this from somewhere else if he couldn't know how to read or write. So, the second reason is that he lives in Mecca. And there was a lot of, not very many Christians or Jews at that time. There's no book or revelation for them to refer to. And when it came for him traveling Syria, he only went 3 times in his lifetime. The first time was when he was a young boy with Abu Talib. The second time was when he did the business trip for Khadija radiallahu anha. And the third time was during the journey of Isra wal Mi'raj. Right? Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi layla min al-masjid al-harami ila al-masjid al-aqsa. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free Masjid al-Aqsa from its oppressors. And so, each time he was in Syria, where there were Christians and Jews living in Syria, he was there for a very short time. So for him to create an entire religion, a perfect word book, where there's no flaw, no imperfection, no contradiction, after 3 short visits, it's not comprehensible. Doesn't make logical sense. And the second thing as well, the blessing of being an Ummi is that it saved Islam from being a religion only for the elites. It is a religion to bring hope to those who are oppressed. It is a religion to bring hope to those who are in need. Hope to those who have no hope in the world, Islam brings that hope. And so that's the beautiful thing about memories as well, is that everyone has it. Not everyone has a pencil and a paper, but everyone can memorize to some degree, inshallah ta'ala. Now, as we come closer to that 40-year marker, there are many introductory moments that occur to show that revelation was coming near. About 2 years before the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he secludes himself and he starts to become really involved in piety and righteousness. And there were more openings that occurred that were much more frequent. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about all that next week. I know this is a Seerah class, but I am going to use the remaining of the time to talk about something important. I want to talk to you all, my brothers, my sisters, my family. With the tragedy that is unfolding right now in Palestine, it's something that's very painful. It's on everyone's minds, hearts, for us to see the Israeli occupation once again attempt a genocide on the Palestinian people. So I'll begin with the question that arises in these situations. What do we do with all the pain and suffering of innocent people? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this in Surah Al-Imran. In the aftermath of the Battle of Uhud, there's a lot of suffering. Hadith in Bukhari says that there was crying from every home in Medina because every home lost someone. Broken hearts after the Battle of Uhud. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, that if a wound should touch you, there has already been wounds that have touched people before. Pain, suffering, it's happened to people before. And that's the nature of life. Some days you'll have good days, some days you'll have harder days, and those days will alternate. But as human beings, we want to see a light at the end of the tunnel. We want to understand the nature of these things, the wisdom why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala causes these things to happen. And the short answer is we'll never know the true wisdom, but we trust Allah. But sometimes He gives us fruits. Sometimes He gives us hopes to keep our faith strong. وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَيَتَّخِذَ مِنْكُمْ شُهَدَاءَ. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make evident those who are believers and those who are not. And He will take to Himself from among you martyrs, the best end that can befall someone in Islam. Wallahu la yuhibbu adh-dhalimin, and Allah does not like the wrongdoers. So let's keep that perspective in mind. That is why we are here, studying the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to learn how to apply his life to our lives. This is how we learn the Quran and Sunnah. This knowledge that we have, that we're engaging in, discussing every week, the Seerah, it's not just an adornment for our lives. It is the lens. It's the lens in how we see and understand everything in our world. And the second thing is that, what is our obligation in this moment? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ. That, O prophets, indeed this religion of yours is only one. وَأَنَا رَبُّكُمْ فَاعْبُدُونَ. And I am your Lord, so worship me alone. And another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. The believers are one brotherhood. Al-Muslim أَخِ الْمُسْلِمِ. That Muslims are a brotherhood, Muslims are a sisterhood, we're a family. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells the narration that when the Muslim body, the Muslim ummah is like a body. That if one part of it gets hurt, gets sick, gets injured, the entire body feels that pain. And so right now, a part of us is in pain. A tragedy is happening within our family. If an actual blood relative was going through anything that is even a fraction of what this is, think about how much it may affect you and me. So what we're seeing, it has to affect us. We must be moved. We must be concerned. Somehow. Some of us might be there, alhamdulillah. Some of us might not be there, but we'll find a way to get there. Because that's our responsibility, that's our obligation. Part of the privilege of being of the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that when things get difficult, we're there for each other. We must have each other's backs. And while we have that concern and we feel that pain, we are people of action. Whenever these things happen, we feel helpless, we don't know what to do, living so far away. But we have Seerah to help us. Look at the family of Yasir, Ali Yasir, radiallahu anhu, whose family was tortured by Abu Jahl. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions could not do anything physical at that time, but they showed support by making dua for them. Sabrun ya Ali Yasir, inna maw'idukum al-jannah. Patience, O family of Yasir, for indeed the promise, your destination, your home will be paradise. And so Sumayya radiallahu anha and Yasir radiallahu anhu, they became the first martyrs of Islam. And their son Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu anhu became an amazing companion, who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that paradise is eager to meet Ammar radiallahu anhu. So what can we do? One thing we can do is raise awareness. It's not really my expertise, but I will say this. If you have a platform, any platform, use it. Speak up. Don't be afraid. You're on the side of the truth. You're on the side of Islam. You're on the side of Allah and His Messenger, and Allah will help you. Allah tells us, وَكَانَ حَقًّا عَلَيْنَا نَصْرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, that it is our duty. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this. It's our duty to help the believers. Allah will help the believers. There's a famous sheikh from Libya named Umar Mukhtar. Some of you guys might know him. Known as the Lion of the Desert. He was feared by the Italian colonial powers who tried to colonize Libya, and he would fight back. A very brave, strong, powerful individual. So one day the Italians, they sent warplanes to Libya, and the soldiers in Libya went to Umar Mukhtar. And they told him they have warplanes. We don't have warplanes. We don't have things like this. And he told them, are the warplanes below the Arsh of Allah or above the Arsh of Allah? Is it below the throne of Allah or is it above the throne of Allah? Because I don't fear anything below the throne of Allah. I only fear the one above it. I fear the Creator, not the creation. And with that, while we're spreading our information, we're trying to raise awareness. Be careful of misinformation and spreading misinformation. We can be held accountable for that on the Day of Judgment. We want to make sure that everything that we raise is truthful. Trust me, the truth is enough. It doesn't need to be any lies in order to get our point across. The truth is enough. The oppression is clear. I'll give a quick example. There's a video that has been circulating that millions of people have already engaged in that shows kids in cages. And it says that Israeli propaganda came and took over this video and said that Palestinians are putting these Israeli children in cages. People went ballistic, right? Somebody else comes and says that no, this is not true. What actually happened is that it's the reverse. Israelis put Palestinian kids in cages. Neither are true. The video that was circulated is actually from 2015 with Syrian kids in cages. which doesn't make it okay. As a matter of fact, as we're speaking, Bashar al-Assad and his Russian political allies are taking this distraction as an opportunity, or this painful moment for our ummah as an opportunity to continue to bomb the Syrian people when the light is not on them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aid our brothers and sisters in Syria and deal with those oppressors as well. Another thing that we can do is by donating and contributing to these causes. The topic of sadaqah is a very crucial, important topic in the Quran. Unfortunately, this, I lament when I say this, but it's kind of been tainted because of the mechanisms of fundraising in masajid, which is necessary. In order to have good, strong Muslim organizations, we have to invest in them and we have to give to them. But whenever people hear sadaqah now, there's a little tension that happens. Everybody kind of tenses up a little bit. But it's an essential, critical part of our faith, which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about it all throughout the Quran. لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ وَمَا تُنْفِقُوا مِنْ شَيْءٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. That you will never achieve true righteousness until you donate from the things that you cherish, from the things that you love. And whatever you give is certainly well known to Allah. And probably what's one of the most important things is to increase our prayers. Increase our devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A lot of dua, tawbah. Seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make a lot of istighfar. This was the tradition of the scholars. Whenever there was a calamity that would fall on the ummah, they would make a lot of istighfar. Because of the verse, ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. That corruption has spread on land and sea as a result of what people's hands have done. So they would immediately seek tawbah in hopes that maybe they're not of the reason why this corruption or why these difficulties happen, and in hopes that that forgiveness or seeking forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will alleviate the pain and suffering of the ummah. So the scholars, they manifested this to it, this verse. Whenever a calamity would fall, what they would do? Make istighfar, a lot of istighfar. Make a lot of dua for Allah's aid, for His protection, and for His acceptance in this situation. And it's also a tragedy that dua is treated like a cop-out or said like the least that you can do. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Dua silah al-mu'min." Dua is the weapon of the believer. It is one of the best things that you could do. In another narration, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, "Dua huwa al-ibadah." Dua is ibadah. It is worship. وَمَا خَلَقَتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created jinn or mankind except to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So dua is worship. What does that tell us about our purpose in this life? Verse in the Quran, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبَ لَكُمْ إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ عَنْ عِبَادَتِي سَيَدْخُلُونَ جَهَنَّمَ دَاخِرِينَ. That your Lord says, call upon me and I will respond to you. Verily, those who disdain my worship will enter hell in humiliation. So dua is not the only thing that we do, but it's one of the most important. So do not denigrate it. Wake up in the middle of the night. Push yourself to wake up in the middle of the night. Pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make dua. Include Gaza in your du'as, Palestine, Masjid al-Aqsa, and every sajda and dua that we do for the foreseeable future. Because the Palestinian cause should remain in the heart of every believer. Masjid al-Aqsa is there in Palestine, in Jerusalem. It's our masjid. It's occupied by the oppressive Israeli regime. This is not any ordinary masjid. It's not Map Seattle. It's Masjid al-Aqsa. It's a blessed land that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sanctified Himself. Subhanalladhi asra bi'abadihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila Masjid al-Aqsa. This is the masjid that Allah mentions in the Quran by name. It's the second masjid that's built on earth. Praying in Masjid al-Aqsa is equivalent to 250 prayers. This is the land in which Rasulullah was taken up to the heavens to meet Allah. It's known as the land of the prophets. Why? Because every prophet was there at some point in their life. The Prophet led all prophets in Masjid al-Aqsa in prayer during the journey of Isra and Mi'raj. Masjid al-Aqsa was what the Muslims faced to pray for the first 14 years of revelation. And then it was changed towards the Kaaba after 16 months in Medina. This is the land in which the angels of Allah spread their wings over until this day. This is the land in which Isa bin Maryam alayhi salam will kill the biggest fitna on earth, the Dajjal. This is the land in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the best inhabitants of earth will reside where Prophet Ibrahim migrated, Jerusalem. This is the land in which Musa alayhi salam requested from Allah to let him die close to it, so much so that just a distance of a stone's throw away from it. We see closeness by loving this land to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how exactly does the enemy of Allah assume that we will ever give up on this land? When the believers say that they will die protecting this land, they actually mean it. And the discussion of timing or wisdom in approach, it's not fruitful right now. We are not there. We don't understand the desperation of nearly a century of pain, oppression, torture, violence, sanctions and killing of children, raping of women. We don't experience the limited access to food, water, and electricity in what Jimmy Carter, former American president, called the largest open-air prison. We are not one of the thousands of prisoners or family members wondering where or why their son, father, brother, mother, sister, or daughter is being held captive. Or one of the elderly Palestinians who still have keys to their homes while they have been kicked out during the Nakba in 1947. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed has happened. Now it's time for us to make dua and help we can. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَلْيُقَاتِلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يَشْرُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا بِالْآخِرَةِ. Now let those who sacrifice this life for the hereafter fight in the call of Allah. وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ مُسْتَضْعِفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ. And what is with you? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking the question. What is with you that we do not fight in the cause of Allah for oppressed men, women, and children who cry out? Why, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving the permission to defend your home, to defend your family, to defend your children, to protect yourself. And this is Islamic law, but even according to international law, it is universally agreed upon that the occupied can resist its occupier. Universally agreed upon. And before anyone tries to twist my words, I want to make something clear. It goes without saying that our Islamic etiquette dictates that this is done without the loss of innocent lives. Women, children, and elderly are excluded from this. We will condemn those deaths. But settlers, knowingly taking over Palestinian homes and being a part of the legitimization of the occupation of Israel, are far from innocent. We look at the Battle of Badr. What sparked it is very interesting. Abu Sufyan, who wasn't Muslim at the time, he will be Muslim later, he essentially gathered the wealth of the Muslims in Mecca because they had migrated and they left their wealth. And he said, I'm going to go and do some trade and business, invest that wealth, make a profit out of it, come back, and that wealth can be used to what? Grow the army of the Quraysh so they can go fight the Muslims. So when Rasulullah ﷺ and the companions, they heard of this happening, they said, nah, that's our stuff. That belongs to us. They took that away from us. So what the original inspiration for the Battle of Badr was to go ransack that caravan and go take it back to the Muslims. And that's what sparked the Battle of Badr. Interesting to reflect on. And it's the projection of Western colonial powers and their many war crimes that make them require us to condemn or clarify everything, which is hypocrisy. for the oppressors and complicit nations to ask this of people who are acting in self-defense, to ask this of people who are oppressed. It's also important to know that Islam established proper war etiquettes and protocols of how to protect the innocent. Rasulullah and the companions, they never purposefully hurt an innocent person in battle. The same Umar Mukhtar that I mentioned earlier against the Italians. It's another incident where he had Italian prisoners of war. And some of his soldiers were wanting to execute the prisoners of war without any due process, without any due trial or anything, just wanted to do it right away. And Umar Mukhtar said, this is not the way. That's not what we do. They said, well, they do it to us. Whether we're interested or not, they're just going to execute you. They do it to us. Umar Mukhtar says, they are not our teachers. We have a way. We have the Quran, we have a Sunnah of Rasulullah. And for the Jordan Petersons of the world, the Nikki Haley's, the Netanyahus of the world, who are inciting genocide on the Palestinian people, first, may Allah guide you to Islam. But if Islam is not written for you, then may you be humiliated and reunited with the rest of the oppressors this earth has seen on the Day of Judgment. I'll now conclude by making a dua for the people in Gaza and people in Palestine, but also we want to also keep in mind all those who are in Syria going through pain, and all those in Afghanistan as well who are afflicted with the earthquake. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on them. And shahada is also given to those who pass away from earthquakes. So I ask you guys to join me in dua, inshallah. Ya Allah, Allahumma laka alhamdu kullu, wa laka shukru kullu, wa ilayka yurja'u al-amru kullu. علانيته وسره أهل أنت أن تعبد أهل أنت أن تحمد لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين. Ya Allah, you have seen what has fallen upon us in Gaza. Ya Allah, our Lord of majesty and might, O Lord of omnipotence and might. Ya Allah, we ask you to give honor and strength to Gaza. Ya Allah, we ask you to give honor and strength to the people of Gaza. O Allah, we ask you to give relief to the people of Gaza. O Allah, we ask you to bring joy to the people of Gaza. Ya Allah, we ask you to bring victory to the people of Gaza. Ya Allah, we ask you to cure our injured. Ya Allah, we ask you to grant recovery to our ill. And Ya Allah, we ask you to accept our martyrs. And Ya Allah, we ask you to have mercy on those, on our dead. And Ya Allah, we ask you to heal their wounds and bring coolness to their pain. Ya Allah, give them and all the Muslims around the world immediate urgent relief, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we ask you to give us and Muslims in every place relief, Ya Allah. O Allah, we ask you to give victory and honor and strength to the Muslims, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we ask you to bring down shirk and bring down the enemies of the deen, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, O Lord of the worlds, glory be to you, glory be to you. You see the oppressors and you delay their punishment until they think that you have forgotten them, and you test their righteousness in this dunya until they despair, and when they despair, you give them victory. Ya Allah, you know that the wounds of the Muslims are so many and their pain is so much in every place and every time. So Ya Allah, give us victory over our enemies, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, keep our feet steadfast, Ya Allah. ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا لا تجعلنا فتنة للقوم الكافرين ونجنا يا ربنا برحمتك من القوم الكافرين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاك الله خير everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.